I'm going to be walking you through the last 3 lines of the second page of Debussy's Pagodas today. I'll give you some tips and tricks. I'll walk through each hand separately, and then we'll give you a practice track with both of them together. So the first thing you should notice in these 3 lines and much of the piece is the only notes that we're going to use are in a pentatonic scale. So we have B, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and G. Those are literally the only 3 notes you have to play in these 3 lines, so it simplifies it. In your right hand, you're going to notice you very rarely play the B. The B is kind of reserved for the melody and for a couple of, bass notes and some really special sounds. So when in doubt, you're usually on a black key. Unless you're doing melody. So let's go ahead and take a first look at the first measure of our right hand. And something really important to note in every measure of this part is where's the melody? Because it really hops around, and that's what is the glue that brings it all together, that gives it meaning to this part. So you'll notice right off the bat, there's a rest in your right hand, even though you are playing something in your right hand. That's to show that the melody has not started yet. And the melody is going to start with this B octave and keep going with G sharp, F sharp, 8th notes, and then G sharp here. So let's listen to the melody. That should sound familiar. It's a melody we've heard in the song already, so you're going to want to bring it out when you hear it. And then our accompaniment notes are going to be these triplets that keep going throughout this section. Sometimes we play them with octaves and with our thumb. We'll need to play here. Sometimes we play them with 2nd and 3rd finger. So it just kind of depends on where they are in the melody. Let's listen to this part, the accompaniment. So you notice I was here octaves and then I switched up here because that's where my melody would have been. So then we're going to go to the second measure, and the melody is no longer in the right hand. Here it switches to left hand. You'll hear it. And you can see it reflected here where there's a rest because the melody has not started until here, even though the left hand's playing some bass notes. So in our right hand, we have our accompaniment, and then we have some half notes that are like a counter melody that are also important. So go ahead and let those half notes ring out the loudest here. Next measure is kind of same thing. Bring out the octaves. Accompaniment, not so much. Here we go, way up. Some of these high notes can look scary to try to find them, but when in doubt, there's usually patterns. This is the same as that. Our D, G sharp, and then we also have D sharp, G sharp, D sharp right here. So they're the same, even though it looks very high. And then we have our left hand, but first let me just play through the right hand up until that point with the metronome. Yeah, that part's not too hard to keep with the metronome. That triplet that keeps going in the background really kind of feels like a clock there, but it sounds really cool. Okay, let's try our left hand now. All right, and you'll notice your left hand has some really long bass notes, whole notes, but there's no way we can physically keep that going because we're up here doing accompaniment or doing melody. So our pedal is going to do most of that work for us. And that means we need to play a little harder on the bass notes. Even though we have piano as our context, the feeling of this section, we're going to actually let those go ahead and ring out pretty loudly. So here we have our bass note going to our accompaniment, which is a lot softer. Another bass note. melody. Go ahead and bring that out as much as you can. Do you notice something I did with the pedal there? We are only hearing our F sharp and our bass E right now. That's because we want to pedal really sensitively. We want to pedal with the melody in our left hand. That emphasizes it. But we don't want to pedal too much. Do you hear that bass note still going? You can kind of faintly hear it. But if we don't pedal completely and we just kind of flutter your foot, this bass note will be able to keep ringing for most of the measure, just as long as you can keep it going while you keep that melody cleared up a tiny bit after your melody notes. So I'll try that one more time. Try to still hear that bass note. The next measure is the same with a bit of a crescendo here. So I'm going for a bass note and the last melody. And here we have our final one. I would really go for this one, the lowest one. Okay, I'm going to play through the bass, the left hand, starting from here, those 4 measures with the metronome. There's our little crescendo, decrescendo that really shapes that part of the song. Okay, let's take a look at the next section where it says toujours animé. Animé means having some movement in both of these parts. We're pianissimo here. The fun part about this section is you're going to have some eighth notes, duple eighth notes, and triplet eighth notes kind of playing back and forth between your 2 different hands the whole time. So let's start with your right hand. This D sharp here is to allow you to get this bass note. I just kind of think of it as a triplet going here, even though it's also kind of a duple going there. But I put it my thumb in my right hand. And then we have all triplets. And you can let this one ring a bit more. We're up in the top part of your piano, which doesn't get as muddy. So you can do a bit more pedal in this part. You'll also hear that this is the melody in our right hand, primarily in our right hand. It's a bit in our left hand too, so you can go ahead and bring that out a bit more. On this section, it's the same thing repeated. So I'm going to play through this whole part with my right hand for you with metronome. I usually finger this part with groups of 3 and 2 because we're in a pentatonic scale. So I like to think of it in groups of 3 and 2. I find it most comfortable. Yeah, and your thumb will probably go on lots of black keys. So I just start off wherever they have me going and do groups of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's try your left hand at the same part. First thing you'll notice is a really, really long bass note. 2 measures tied together. And that's really hard to actually achieve when you have so many other notes going on. So we're going to let that ring out pretty loudly in spite of the pianissimo. And we're going to dampen more. We're going to give more pedal in this whole part. We're not going to lift it between measures. And it's going to be kind of a lush texture. So let's try your left hand here We have duples first and triplets. Yeah. And then we have our same thing here on the second line. Go ahead and practice looking before you leap in this whole song, especially when you have to really go for a bass note and then be back up for an eighth note. You can take your time a bit here. Rubato is totally appropriate in this part. But I find it easier to look before I leap quickly out of the corner of my eye and then back up and look here. So try to, in your peripheral vision, get good at looking for it before you leap. So I'm going to play left hand notes here with the metronome. I'm still kind of letting it ring. I kind of can hear my bass note still. It's kind of a lot of pedal, but it sounds okay in here. You could flutter your foot a bit. You'll also notice you kind of hear your melody in the left hand. It's like an echo of the right hand. Here you have, and then the immediately after. So you can kind of bring out both hands and voice them kind of bright, so you can hear the melody in both. Okay, I'm going to put both hands together. Okay, that's where you're going to end it for your school assignment. So I would let it ring here. And hear that, the pretty overtones with our pentatonic scale ring out. On the next page, usually you'd have some fun stuff coming up. But yeah, I hope you have fun with this song. And I'm going to give you a practice track with the 3 lines. So here's all of them put together.